Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. So as you guys do know, we have Norway chess going on right now. Got that hooked up. Cool. And so I went ahead and grabbed another game. I had a little bit of time left, so I was like, man, let me go ahead and hook another game up. So I do have the Wesley versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave game for you guys, taking out around 4. So I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Of course, for all my people that are in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay. Magandang umaga to you. Magandang hapon. It is getting closer to afternoon. I'm going to say tayo. Mag-lunch na tayo. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking my video. I appreciate you guys very much. Anybody who is coming from France, I will say bonjour to you. Comment ça va? Comment allez-vous? Bienvenue. I appreciate you guys very much. Merci beaucoup for coming by and taking a look at my video. Ça me fait plaisir de te voir, mes amis. I appreciate you guys very much. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. Get my volume up. You know, sometimes I forget. You know, it's a lot to remember when you're making a video. But I do have knight to f3. We got d5. We got g3. g6. We have bishop to g2. Bishop to g7. Castles. Knight to f6. We got c4, c6. So we have the King's Indian attack. The double Fianchetto variation. And as some of you guys might know, it looks like a Slav. You got the Slav type situation. If you push d4, you know, which is probably going to happen at some point, right? You're going to have a very Slav or, you know, even like a Grunfeld type structure going on. But we do see b3. Bishop comes to g4. Bishop comes to b2. You got to be really quick with this bishop development on b2 because that rook is looking kind of lonely over there, right? So we got castles by black. We got d4. Bishop takes f3. Bishop takes f3. And then we do have a5. And something I'll personally say about this, I play the Catalan a lot as white. You know, I'm a d4 guy. So, you know, even though I don't play the King's Indian, you know, this is a position where, you know, I kind of know what to do. I mean, some moves come to mind for me. You know, we got queen to c2, knight b to d2, or knight to d2 since there's no other knight. You know, we got e3s rolling, you know, because this is very, very similar to structures that I play myself. So that's one of the good things about, like, you know, studying any opening really is definitely going to help you play like some other openings. So be confident. So we do see knight coming to c3. That's also one of the other moves. We do see e6. And we got e3, and then knight comes to a6, and this is the novelty of the game. It's a little bit weird, the placement of the knight. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, a lot of the times when you do this, you're thinking about redirecting the knight back to c7. But, I mean, the knight really doesn't have a lot of prospects from a6. You know, you're not plopping it down onto b4 because it's just going to get kicked immediately with an a3. There's no home for it on d3, so it has to, like, pretty much go back where it came from. And knight to c3 is not an option. So, like I said, I'm not sure exactly what the plan was with this move exactly. But I kind of feel like it just kind of wastes a little bit of time. Puts, you know, Maxime in, you know, not the best possible position. Knight b to d7 was probably a little bit better. Or even pushing c5 maybe, and then putting knight to c6. And we do have queen to e2. A rook comes to b8. We do see rook a to c1. The queen goes down to d7. We do have c5, and then we do have queen to e7. And so, you know, white is definitely commanding a nice little lead. You know, they are trying to make it really, really hard to push b5. As of right now, of course, b5 is not possible because you're just going to be taking en passant, and the knight is a little bit loose. But, you know, they're really cramping black style a little bit. And we do see bishop back to g2. And due to the fact that Maxime does feel a little bit cramped, I mean, I feel like he kind of feels like in this position he really kind of has to do something. But what he actually does is not the absolute correct thing. But as you guys can see, you know, white is commanding a lot of space. And, you know, one of the things about when you're playing a game and somebody has a lot of space, you start to kind of feel like physically like, you know, you're getting kind of like, you know, starved like for breath, right? And so you have to kind of do something, right? So we do see e5 in a position. But the thing about this particular move is at the moment, this bishop on b2 isn't like the absolute best. So e5 is actually kind of like allowing it to get liberated just a little bit. Because once we see pawn taking e5, as you can see, this this bishop has come to life just a little bit more. So, you know, like I say before in all of my videos, you have to be careful when you're going into trades because you might be giving your opponent a little bit too much. We do see knight back to d7. We do see f4, and like I said, that bishop is alive. You know, once we can kind of, you know, push some pawns out of the way, we do have a lot more scope for our bishop. So the knight d takes on c5. We see e4. We got d4, and you know, there's a little problem with this pawn. It's kind of like all in white's territory. And it's a little bit by itself. So we do see the knight coming back down to d1. We see rook b to d8. We see knight to f2, just trying to make sure that we stop this pawn from advancing. We're trying the best that we can, at least, to stop it from advancing in this position. We do see rook to d7. We got bishop to h3. This is a very useful move when you do Fianchetto your bishop to try to like attack, especially like a heavy piece when you get it on d7. We do see a rook coming back to rook d to d8, and then we do see rook f to d1. And now we have successfully stopped this pawn from rolling. And of course, the next idea is to put the knight there and just basically blockade the pawn. So we do see g5, and we have actually reached the point in the game that if you do want to pause the video, this is not the move that was played in the game, but there is a really nice strong move in the position. Actually, there's actually really two strong moves in the position. But so really, if you guess either one of the moves, I'll definitely take it. But if you want to go ahead and pause the video and see what either one of the moves is in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. Let me get this a little bit down. Okay. So for those of you that, I mean, you're really familiar with, like, you know, the king's safety and stuff like that as far as the pawns are concerned in front of the king. What you guys should notice is that this move from g6 to g5 greatly weakened the king. And so more specifically, you know, because you have a dark square bishop, the light squares are really weak here, right? So, you know, either of these two moves would definitely work. I have bishop to f5 in there, but you can also, they're interchangeable. I mean, you can go queen to h5 first and then follow up with bishop to f5. The idea is basically the same. You're basically taking advantage of the fact that you have kind of a little battery going on over here, and these light squares are really, really, you know, undefended. So if you did guess the move, bishop to f5 or queen to h5, you would be correct. But the idea is basically after, like, you would see like maybe h6, queen would come to h5. You'd see rook f to e8 and then knight to g4. And as you can see, I mean, it's a whole lot of pieces hanging out right next to this king right here. And something's going to have to give at some point. So it's pretty bad. But what we actually saw in the game after g5 is we actually saw bishop to d4. And like I said before, last video, you know, these are blitz games. So, I mean, you know, you're expecting that there are a lot of things that are going to be missed in these positions because, you know, players are taking just a couple of seconds to kind of look at the position and make a move. So, I mean, it's completely understandable that you would just go into just something that's just kind of more automatic. So, bishop taking d4 is definitely a logical move as well. You're just literally just snapping a pawn. And so we have pawn taking f4, pawn taking f4, knight back to e6, but it's just, we simply go back to e3 with the bishop. And we are inviting some trades. The queen comes down to h4. We see queen to g4. Like, please trade me. And that's what we actually see. Queen taking g4 with check. We do see knight taking g4. We got rook taking d1, rook taking d1. And white is like, yes, please trade me pieces because they are up a pawn. So, you know, in games should favor them going forward. So rook comes to d8, yet another trade. Rook takes d8, knight takes d8, and then we have bishop down to f1. You know, of course, we want to snap this knight off here. If it just stays there and doesn't care about itself, then we're just going to snap it off the board and you know, damage black's pawn structure to make matters worse. But we do see knight down to b4. We got a4 just protecting our pawn. We see knight to c2. We got bishop down to d2. We see knight to e6. We got bishop to c4. We got b6. And then we do have king to f2. And this does kind of allow MVL to just claw back just a little bit. And this is definitely a position where Maxime had to find like the only move. And he really did. So, you know, it's really nice to see these players, like as strong as they are, like find these only moves. And I told you guys before, this is incredibly hard to do, is to find these only moves in these positions, especially in the Blitz game. So we do see knight to c5, and you know, I think a lot of people would find that just simply because, I mean, you're just attacking a pawn that's undefended. So, I mean, very logical to make that move. So the king steps over to e2. We see knight to d4. We see king up to e3. And then we actually see knight to c2 with check in the game. The king goes back to e2, and we see knight to d4. But both of these situations, Maxime had an opportunity to find a move. And he does go down to d1. Or Wesley goes down to d1 after we repeat moves. But what Maxime actually had in this position is just to take the pawn on b3 because it is under defended and double attacked. So the bishop will probably come up to c3 and then h5. Knight to f6 with check. Bishop takes f6 and then pawn takes f6. And we are dead even. You know, so that was something that, you know, Maxime had the ability to do. Well, like I said, he did not do that. So the king came down to d1. We saw b5, pawn takes b5, pawn takes b5, and then we do see bishop to d5, which wasn't possible before because the pawn was on c6. So, you know, the bishop was a little bit more trapped. So we do see knight d takes b3. We see bishop up to e3. We got a4, and this is really crazy because, you know, white's king's position is like super crucial in this particular position, and because we can go king to c2. So, you know, if the king had been a little bit further away, then this is like not the best for white. But because the king was where it was, it pretty much just saves the entire position. So we do have h5, and then knight comes to f6 with check. Bishop takes f6. Pretty much similar to what we saw earlier, but it's just a lot different as far as the position being much better for white. So we do see the knight coming to d7. We got e5. Knight b comes to c5. We see f5. And of course, we can't take this pawn because that would just be hanging the knight. So we're not going to do that. We do see b4, but as you can see, the bar super jumped up. Wesley finds the correct path to go down. He does find e6, and after the knight takes on f6, he goes pawn takes f7 with check. And this does put Maxime in a basically completely losing position. And it is in this position that Maxime does resign the game. Just to kind of show you guys the possible, like, two moves you can make. You know, you either bring the king down to g7 immediately or go over to f8 immediately. But I'll show you those two different moves. If the king comes down to g7, you're looking at bishop to h6 with check, deflecting the king away from f8. And then after the king takes, you are queening your pawn. And then this is just 1000% winning. And if you do decide to go king to f8, you are completely dropping your knight with check. And then after the king steps down to g7, you are promoting your piece, your pawn to a queen. And you can see, I mean, there's no winning this ever. So in light of those two situations, this is why Maxime did resign the game. So that is that game. And like I said before, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Meron salamat and merci beaucoup. And I will catch you guys next time.